Motoring 2011 on TSN is brought to you by Quaker State, Real Durable Oil, and Michelin, a better way forward.
This week we find ourselves in Seattle, Washington. It's not the first time over the past several months that a car company has chosen an American city to launch a small car. It was just a few weeks ago we found ourselves in Manhattan driving the Fiat 500 Cabriolet. And you know, the reason is quite simple. If a small car can make it in America, it can make it anywhere. So Nissan has chosen Seattle to launch its second generation Versa. Now, Nissan has been in the news at both ends of the automotive spectrum with the GTR and the Leaf, so it's hard to get excited about an entry-level vehicle. However, Nissan says you should, especially if you happen to be a social pragmatist.
It's a growing segment in Canada. It's one of the few where we actually see growth in the midterm. Back last year was 85,000 units. We anticipate growth to about 110,000 units by 2016. That's 40% growth, so it's pretty significant. We're expecting that with this new 2012 Versa sedan, we will capture greater sales within a growing segment. Competition is getting stiffer, but we're stepping up to the challenge with this new car.
They've done a very good job for the segment. This is an important segment for Canada, especially with what fuel prices are doing. It's not a segment where you're going to get a lot of luxury. You have to accept that it's going to be a lot of plastic, it's going to be thin doors and things like that. But they've done a really nice job on a segment that this is where a lot of people are going to be driving.
1.6 liter. It's the second generation of that motor. We have both variable intake and exhaust valve timing, so that's an improvement on this vehicle. Also, we have the second generation of the CVT. It's a brand new CVT, smaller, more compact, lightweight, much more, has a wider gear ratio. We have a sub-planetary gear set on the transmission as well, so it improves the overall range and ability to really maximize the efficiency of the vehicle.
Social pragmatist.
I have no idea what that is.
Yeah, marketing buzzword. I think it's just your typical Canadian customer that's value conscious, that wants practicality first and foremost from their car.
Just by what they were saying, I guess someone who is looking at a car, it has to go from A to B, it has to do it inexpensively, and this is a good way to do it.
Design was definitely a big deal when thinking about the development of this car, and particularly what we went for at Nissan with this new Versa sedan is more of a sophisticated look with more of a rounded appearance. Definitely a lot of thought went into the aerodynamism as well, just to bearing in mind the importance of fuel efficiency in the segment. So not only is it an appealing, sophisticated design, but it's also a very practical design as well.
It's good looking. I wouldn't call it sexy. I would call it more along the lines of handsome. It's certainly a lot better than the car that it replaces. It's just a nicely proportioned vehicle that I don't think anybody would be ashamed to drive.
You know, Henry Ford once said you can have the Model T in any color you want as long as it's black. Well, when it comes to the interior color of the Versa, you can have any color you want too, as long as it's black. Well, they call it charcoal. But speaking of the interior, I can't remember sitting in the back of a subcompact where I've had this much legroom. Now, I know I've got the dimensions of a crash test dummy, but it's amazing, and this seat is all the way back. In fact, there's so much room back here, it's actually given Nissan some bragging rights.
It's tremendous. I mean, if there's anything that the rear legroom is bigger than BMW 5 Series, Mercedes E-Class. I mean, those are some pretty big standards that we're breaking there. So it's a tremendously functional car. The trunk space is 419 liters. That's better than a Corolla. And all of that, again, packaged within a subcompact segment, it's a tremendous proposition for the customer.
They are claiming the cheapest car in Canada. There's a bit of a caveat to that. It's the cheapest car in Canada if you don't want air conditioning. I don't really think they're going to be selling too many of those. It's a marketing ploy. A lot of the manufacturers do it. I don't like it, simply because you come in for the cheapest price, you're not going to be walking out with that car.
We have some marketing firepower as well devoted to the launch of this car. So stay tuned, and we hope to make this launch exciting and successful.
So you like fishing? Have I got a job for you? More later on Kenzie's Corner.
Bigger and it's bolder, and it comes with a boatload of leading-edge technology. But does all of that really make it better? On this edition of Test Drive, the Audi A6. The new A6 has morphed from a rather rounded nondescript sedan into something that has significant curb appeal. The bolder lines and LED daytime running lights aside, it's the optional LED headlights that add the defining touch. They are great to look at and even better when driving at night. The new A6 also benefits from its stretch wheelbase and a hybrid aluminum body. When compared to a regular steel body, the new A6's body is 15% lighter. This pays dividends in all areas. The bigger part of the A6 equation is found in a back seat that has enough space for 2 adults to luxuriate and an enormous 530-litre trunk. It benefits from not only split folding rear seats, but also a ski pass-through that has its own protective sack. The new A6 is powered by a 3-litre direct injection 6 that uses a supercharger to deliver its goods. In this case, it puts out 310 horsepower and, more importantly, 325 pound-feet of torque at a low 2,900 RPM. Tromp the gas and the riders are whisked to 100k in a scant 5.5 seconds. The flip side is fuel economy. When compared to the outgoing V8 engine, the new 6 sips well over a litre per 100 kilometres less in both the city and the highway disciplines. In simple terms, power and economy in one honey of an engine. Interior design has come a long way in a very short period of time, and nowhere is it better illustrated than this A6. The materials are exquisite and the layout very logical. Of course, it has one of those all-encompassing central controllers. It is, however, easier to use than most. The one thing I didn't like, this screen should be touch sensitive. It's not. The power is relayed to the road through a slick-shifting 8-speed manumatic transmission and Audi's Quattro all-wheel drive. It also features torque vectoring. In a corner, the system sends more power to the outside rear wheel, which physically turns the car in and reduces the risk of understeer. Mind you, the 255/35R20 tyres, which are part of the S-Line package, deliver a ton of grip in the first place. One of the things I really learned to appreciate about this A6 is the ability to tune the car to the nature of the drive. There's a comfort setting, a dynamic setting and an automatic setting. That one flip-flops back and forth according to what the driver's doing. There's also an individual setting. Now it allows you to adjust the steering and suspension and/or the engine and transmission. It really does give you two very different cars in one tidy package. Logic dictates that a full-bodied sedan should not be able to dance its way through a corner, but dance the A6 does. It belies its size from a dynamic perspective as well or better than any of its peers. In the comfort mode, the damping is cosseting and the steering nice and light. Ramp up to the dynamic mode and everything firms up noticeably. There is less body roll, the steering delivers the required feedback, and the response from the throttle and transmission, well, it's more immediate. This new A6 really is bigger and better in every conceivable way, from the powertrain to the all-wheel drive system to a cabin that is truly luxurious. However, its forte is the fact it can be all things to all drivers. It is a luxury sedan, but it's also a full-on sports sedan.
But it has to be said, there is something going on here which you wouldn't normally expect.
You have probably noticed this young lad popping up on Motoring with an accent that sounds a lot like Graham Fletcher, who's been doing test drive for almost a quarter of a century on Motoring. Well, his name is Billy Lyon. He loves cars, and on behalf of the other old guys, we'd like to welcome Billy to the Motoring team. Now, Billy is also the online editor at motoringtv.com, and among his many ventures, he's been asking viewers, how cool is your car? Okay, here's the deal. You send us a photo of your cool car. We will post it on the Motoring website. Now check out the details, but we're going to be picking winners on a regular basis, and that winner will receive some cool swag from Quaker State and Michelin and some other things. And maybe the bonus, the winner and the car will be featured on the Motoring broadcast. And now let's present our very first winner and their cool car.
Hi, my name is Tom Olga, and this is my 2000 supercharged Toyota Celica. So this is my 2000 Toyota Celica. It was purchased completely bone stock back in 2006. It was originally purchased to be a daily driver for myself to get to school and back. But since then, my imagination took over quite a bit and became the masterpiece that you see in front of you. The biggest eye-catching modification I've done to the vehicle is the Lambo doors, which took approximately 3 days to install. Now, believe it or not, I do have a daytime job. I'm an engineering technician at Well & Hydro, and it's because of that job that I'm able to afford all the stuff that I've done to this car. I've spent countless hours after work and weekends working on this thing, and I spent close to $25,000 in modifications. When I purchased this vehicle, the interior was a dull gray color, not much to look at. I basically redid it all, and I did a base clear with red and black theme. I added accents with 3M carbon wrap vinyl, and I also revamped the entire stereo system by installing a Pioneer head unit and a full caption audio system, including a 1000-watt amp to run the subs. And it's got PlayStation. Now, the heart of this entire project is a 1.8-liter VVTi engine, which I've managed to mate with the TRD supercharger. This was my first real big project on an engine, and I've managed to run everything through a factory ECU, and I can actually fine-tune everything as I'm driving with a Greddy eManage Blue.
What do cars and motorcycles have in common? A lot more than you might think, and I'll tell you why at motoringtv.com.
When you look at that level of technology transfer, that's what it takes to make yourself be a champion. Quality partners, technology transfer. Lee Willard Michelin provide us with that.
For years in Toronto, politicians have been arguing about what to do with the Gardiner Expressway. Do they bury it or just get rid of it? Well, recently there has been a suggestion to add another level and make it two-tier, and of course the reaction was predictable, with people rolling their eyeballs. Well, here in Seattle, it's called Highway 99, and they're doing just that. Multiple lanes going out of the city, multiple lanes coming in, and it seems to work just fine. All right, let's head to the Quaker State Garage. Join Bill Gardiner.
Hey Brad, I've got our Chevy Cruze Eco model here. This is a car from our long-term test fleet, and it's got a 1.4-liter turbocharged four-cylinder engine. Now, there's nothing new about turbocharging, being used for decades in automotive. All the big rigs that you see on the road, the diesel big rigs, use turbocharging, and lots of cars have turbocharging. But you know, 15, 20 years ago, primarily we used turbocharging in automotive to take an average size engine that would be sort of mundane or normal performance and turn it into a, you know, fire-breathing, road-eating machine. And if you think back to those GMs 20, 25 years ago, a lot of their rear-wheel drive mid-size cars had 3.8-liter V6s, pretty plain Jane engine, reliable, but didn't set the world on fire. But the Buick Grand National took that same 3.8-liter pushrod V6, turbocharged it, and turned it into a car that would accelerate in a straight line. I mean, it would burn the rear tires off. It was really, really powerful, very fast car. But in the Cruze Eco, you're starting out with a very small displacement engine, only 1.4 liters. If that engine was normally aspirated, in other words, non-turbo, it wouldn't have adequate power in this car. But this engine has 138 horsepower and a very broad torque curve that comes in very low. That's a characteristic of turbocharged engines, and that makes the car drive really, really well. On the Cruise 1.4 liter engine, the turbocharger is integrated right into the exhaust manifold, which saves weight and complexity and makes for better packaging. Keep in mind, with any turbocharged engine, this is an engine that runs much hotter, and the turbine, the turbo itself, spins at tremendously high RPM. Now, I don't have the specs on the Cruise Eco Turbo. I didn't find any specs in the GM press release, but I'll give you an example. Ford, with their EcoBoost 3.5 engine, the turbocharger spins as high as 205,000 RPM. And I can guarantee you this one spins in excess of 100,000 RPM. That's tremendous RPM, and that requires really good lubrication. So this is an application where synthetic oils are perfect. You're going to get the value from using synthetic oils in any turbocharged or supercharged engine. Important tip, if you've got a turbocharged engine in your vehicle, when you pull over to shut it off, let it idle for a minute and don't goose the throttle before you shut it off. Just let it settle down to a base idle for a minute, and then turn it off, because that turbocharger can still be spinning in excess of 100,000 RPM, and you don't want to take away the lubrication. You want it to get lubricated and cooled for a minute and then shut it off. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardiner for Motoring 2011.
The Fleetwood Country Cruisin' is one of North America's largest outdoor car shows. Held on Steve Plunkett's private estate, the local car enthusiast produced yet another entertaining event this year. Thousands gathered on a beautiful weekend in June, as no matter your taste, you had it all there. From beautiful Eldorados, Mach 1 Mustangs, truck wheels as big as your kids, shiny new Camaros with wings, to good old farmers' dairy vans. But the jewel of the show was a performance by 8 tractors like you've never seen them before.
It's hard to explain it to people until you actually see it. People, when they hear square dancing tractors, first off, they think square dancing's for old people. And I think so too myself, because I couldn't dance it in my own shoes. But to actually see it in tractors, it's fun. We get the audience involved pretty well. It doesn't matter how young you are. We've had people grade 8s love it, and all the way up to 90-year-olds. There was a small group of guys from a small town called Teeswater. They seen the show in the United States of another group that tried it, so we wanted to better it and see if we could do a better job and see if we could actually dance with tractors. And it's blowing up to become a whole thing to go around all of Ontario to different fairs and events and car shows. And we've been training since 2007, once a week during the summer months, sometimes twice a week when we're training for a show. To start a new dance, we usually figure out what we try to do. We walk it, and then we get on the tractors and try and drive it. And usually it takes about 4 or 5 weeks to perfect a 5-minute part, because you got 8 tractors trying to do the same thing at the exact same time in a space 80 by 80. First year was almost bumper cars. We broke a lot of equipment. We've had to buy about 6 parts tractors just to keep the old tractors running. That's the funnest part, is kind of running into each other, having a beer after. It's all about fun. We're not doing it for big money. Most of the time we give a bunch to donations or good causes.
Closed captioning of Motoring 2011 is brought to you by
Greener, fuel efficient, global. This is Chevrolet Now, driving our world forward.
Have you noticed more fishing holes around your part of the country these days? You know, police officers standing beside cemeteries at 6:30 in the morning. What, are they trying to catch these folks who are trying to squeeze a couple of extra hours of grief in and still get to the office on time? Come on. Now, most people, I think, believe that the police officers are doing this so they can raise money for their departments. But my understanding is that most of the money doesn't go to the police department. It goes to the municipality or to the province. Most people also think that policemen have a quota. Well, officers I've spoken to say there isn't a quota per se. Now, if everybody else in the detachment is writing 50 tickets a day and you're writing 3, well, somebody's going to notice. So I wonder, it's not for the money. It's obviously not for safety. I mean, the people at those cemeteries are already dead. So why are they doing this? I mean, the police officer doesn't show up at work and says, I'm going to grab my radar gun and go stand by the cemetery this morning. Somebody is telling him to do this. This is part of somebody's plan. I'd like to speak to that person. What is the plan? Is that the best use of, what, a $60,000 officer with a $50,000 cruiser? Come on. The point of policemen, policewomen, is serve and protect. Okay, you put a radar gun by a school zone while school's in session, that's protecting. By a cemetery, that's a complete waste of time. So who's doing that? Give me a call. I just want to know. I'm Jim Kenzie.
Do you know why you need to log on to motoringtv.com right now? Find out which manufacturers have loved the first 6 months of this year and which ones would actually prefer to forget them. Jim Kenzie suggests you wear a hard hat next time you're in Montreal, and find out why I am sick and tired of rude drivers here in Toronto. And of course, don't forget to join our Facebook family to give us your opinion.
You know, life has been good for Nissan of late. Business is up about 7%, and it just completed its most successful year in its history in Canada, selling just over 12,000 vehicles. And of course, it hopes the trend will continue with the new Versa. What's our take? Well, I have to agree with automotive journalist Jill McIntosh, who said earlier it's a nice little car, and it is. And they've made some big improvements, especially with that CVT transmission. I didn't want to drive its predecessor because the tranny was so irritating, but the new one has been improved. But I have to think that Nissan would agree with me when I say the two biggest things going for this new car is price and interior space. I mean, inside it feels more like a compact than a subcompact. As for design, well, this is how Nissan puts it: higher than expected design value, whatever that means. Personally, I find it just a little dated, especially when you put it up against some of the competition. However, Nissan did say that it is pointing this vehicle, at least in Canada, towards a more mature demographic. So there you go. And remember, they still have the hatchback. That's it for now. We'll see you next time out as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
We saw a need, knowing that we weren't going to do a next generation minivan, we saw a need for this product. It's not exactly a van, but as I said, with all its attributes, I mean, and given the current state and the price of gas, I think it more than meets everyone's needs.
Motoring 2011 on TSN has been brought to you by Quaker State, Real Durable Oil, and Michelin, a better way forward.